The greatest competition you will ever face is not with the person sitting next to you, not with a neighbor, and not even with those who doubt you. The real battle is with the person you see in the mirror every morning. Too many people waste years trying to prove themselves to others, seeking approval, applause, or validation. But here's the truth: when the lights fade and the audience leaves, you are still left with yourself. And if you've been performing for others, instead of growing for yourself, you'll end up empty. Proving yourself to yourself means living by your own standard of growth. It means asking, am I better today than I was yesterday? That's the real scoreboard of life. Not how many people clapped for you, not how many followers you have, not how many people recognized your name, but how much progress you've made on the inside. Every day you should wake up with one mission: to become a stronger, wiser, more disciplined version of yourself. You don't have to impress the crowd, you have to impress your conscience. When your head hits the pillow at night, the question isn't, what did they think of me? It's, did I do my best today? Did I keep my word? Did I grow even just a little? Here's something important. When you live to prove yourself to others, you live like a slave. You'll change your decisions based on opinions. You'll trade authenticity for approval, and you'll sacrifice long-term growth for short-term applause. But when you live to prove yourself to yourself, you live free. Free from comparison, free from insecurity, free from the exhausting need to please people who may not even care. The secret is this: if you keep proving yourself to yourself, the results will speak so loudly that you won't have to say a word. People may notice, they may applaud, they may admire, but by then it won't matter, because the greatest reward isn't their applause. The greatest reward is knowing you honored your potential. So stop chasing their nod of approval. Start chasing your own respect. Be the kind of person you admire. Build habits you're proud of. Create results you can't ignore. Prove yourself to yourself, not others, and you'll never have to pretend a single day in your life. The only true competition in life is not with your neighbor, not with your colleague, not with the person on social media, but with the one staring back at you in the mirror. That face you see every morning, that's your real rival. Too many people waste their time trying to measure themselves against others, chasing comparisons that do nothing but rob them of peace and focus. The truth is, no matter how hard you try, there will always be someone who runs faster, earns more, looks sharper, or talks smoother. If you define your worth by outpacing someone else, you'll never win, because the target keeps moving. But when you shift the race inward, everything changes. The question becomes, am I ahead of who I was yesterday? Did I grow? Did I improve? Did I keep my word to myself? That's the only scoreboard that really matters. Because the person you were last week, last month, last year, that's the one you've got to beat. Compete with that version, and you'll live a life of steady progress instead of restless comparison. When you compete with others, you live in reaction. If they succeed, you feel smaller. If they stumble, you feel taller. But when you compete with yourself, you live in creation. You build something new each day. You don't need someone else to fail for you to feel successful. Your measure is your own improvement, not another man's decline. That's a healthier, stronger, and far more rewarding way to live. Think about it. What happens if you win the competition against someone else? Maybe you out-earn them. Maybe you drive a nicer car. Maybe you live in a bigger house. But what then? Another person shows up who has more, and the cycle begins again. It's endless. The treadmill never stops. That's why so many people burn themselves out, because they're chasing an illusion of victory that doesn't even exist. But if you win the competition with yourself, you've won something permanent. You're not just stacking trophies, you're stacking character. You're building discipline, confidence, and integrity. Those are victories no one can take away. That's the real prize. The mirror test is simple but powerful. At the end of the day, look yourself in the eye and ask, did I give my best today? Did I do what I said I'd do? Did I honor my own potential, even in small steps? If the answer is yes, then you're ahead. And here's the secret: if you keep winning that small inner battle, day after day, it compounds into something extraordinary. Too many people are obsessed with being the best. But the best compared to who? Compared to your friend, compared to your coworker, compared to the world. That's a dangerous game. Because if your worth is tied to being better than someone else, you'll always be insecure. But if your worth is tied to being better than you were before, you'll always have purpose. Here's what happens when you live by this principle: you stop resenting others. You can celebrate their success without feeling threatened, because you're not running their race. You're running yours. You can admire someone's strength without it making you feel weak. because your competition isn't with them. You're too busy becoming your own next level. And here's something else: competing with yourself demands honesty. You can fool other people with appearances, but the mirror doesn't lie. It reflects who you are, not who you pretend to be. That's why this kind of competition is the most powerful. It strips away excuses and demands authenticity. The mirror says, forget the mask, forget the show. What did you really do today? If you take this approach, you'll discover a new kind of freedom. No more comparing, no more chasing approval, no more bitterness. Just steady, consistent growth. You won't win every day. Some days the mirror will remind you that you fell short, that you could have done better. But even then, the beauty of competing with yourself is that tomorrow gives you another chance, and the only person standing in your way is you. So stop running against others. Their race is theirs and yours is yours. Start running against yesterday's version of you. Let today's effort outdo yesterday's excuses. Let tomorrow's discipline surpass today's weakness. If you keep beating the person in the mirror, you'll become someone you can truly respect. And at the end of the journey, respect for yourself is the highest victory you could ever win. Growth is measured by progress, not by applause. Too often people confuse recognition with achievement. They think if the crowd cheers, if the spotlight shines, if the noise is loud enough, then it must mean they've grown. But applause is not proof of progress. It's only an echo of perception. Real growth isn't about who notices. Real growth is about who you become. The applause may sound good for a moment, but it fades quickly. What lasts is the quiet discipline you practice when nobody is watching. The small improvements stacked one on another. The late nights spent learning. The early mornings spent working. The private choices that build the public results. Progress happens in the shadows long before applause ever reaches your ears. Think about the farmer. He doesn't measure his success by whether people compliment the field. He measures it by the harvest that comes after months of steady planting, watering, and waiting. If he looked for applause every day, he'd quit, because no one claps for a seed. But he knows progress is happening beneath the soil. And in due season, the evidence shows up for all to see. That's how growth works. Applause can be misleading. Sometimes people cheer when you've done nothing significant. Sometimes they stay silent even when you've made great strides. If you live for the noise of approval, you'll always be tossed back and forth. Some days you'll feel on top of the world, and other days you'll feel invisible. But if you live for progress, you'll be stable. Because progress is something you can measure against yourself. You can see it, feel it, and know it, even if no one else does. Growth is about becoming more capable, more disciplined, more consistent. It's about stretching your capacity and building strength in areas that once felt weak. You don't need applause for that. The satisfaction comes from looking back and realizing you're no longer where you used to be. That you've moved forward. That you've climbed higher. That you've become someone stronger than before. That's the real reward. One of the dangers of applause is that it can trap you. It can make you settle for recognition instead of mastery. Some people perform just enough to get noticed, but they stop pushing when the clapping starts. They confuse approval for arrival. They think the cheers mean they've made it, when in reality they've only scratched the surface. Progress doesn't stop when people notice you. Progress stops when you stop growing. Another danger is that applause can fool you into thinking you're advancing, when really you're just entertaining. People will cheer for talent, for style, for charisma. But talent without discipline doesn't last. Style without substance collapses. Charisma without character fades. Progress is what makes achievement durable. Applause cannot hold you up when life tests your foundation. Only true growth can. The wise measure is not, how many are clapping for me? The wise measure is, how much stronger have I become? How much more disciplined am I today compared to yesterday? How much closer am I to the vision I set for myself? Those are questions that cut through the noise and reveal the truth. When you measure by progress, you'll find joy in the process. Every step forward becomes meaningful, even if no one else notices. You'll appreciate the small victories: the day you resisted an old temptation, the moment you stuck to your schedule, the morning you got up when you didn't feel like it. Those things may not earn you a standing ovation, but they're the building blocks of a powerful life. And here's the irony: if you keep focusing on progress, eventually the applause will come anyway. People will see the results. They'll notice the fruit. But by then, you won't be living for it. You won't need it, because your growth won't depend on the noise outside. It will depend on the progress within. So measure wisely. Don't chase applause, chase advancement. Don't count the claps, count the steps forward. Don't settle for being noticed, strive for being transformed. At the end of the day, the world may or may not applaud, but the mirror will tell you the truth. And if you can look into it and see growth, you've already won the only approval that matters, your own. The goal is to be better today than yesterday. That's the real standard of success. Not comparison with someone else, not measuring yourself against the crowd, but simply asking, am I a little stronger, a little wiser, a little more disciplined than I was the day before? If the answer is yes, then you're on the right track. Too many people get trapped in the illusion of giant leaps. They think success comes overnight, that transformation happens in a single moment. But growth is not measured in sudden explosions. It's built day by day, brick by brick, habit by habit. The real progress is often so subtle you barely notice it in the moment. But look back over weeks, months, and years, and the change is undeniable. Being better today than yesterday doesn't mean perfection. It doesn't mean you'll never stumble. It means that even when you fall, you rise with more wisdom than before. It means you take the lessons of yesterday's mistakes and turn them into today's strength. It's about steady forward motion, even if the steps are small. Think of it like climbing a mountain. You don't leap from the bottom to the peak in one jump. You take one step, then another, then another. Some days you move faster, other days slower. But as long as you're climbing, you're progressing. And when you finally look back, you'll see how far you've come. Because every day you chose to be a little better than the last. The danger is in standing still. Yesterday's progress is not enough for today's challenges. Yesterday's discipline cannot carry today's weight. Life demands growth, and if you're not improving, you're declining. That's why the simple question, am I better today than yesterday, is so powerful. It keeps you honest. It keeps you moving. It prevents complacency from setting in. Improvement can happen in many forms. Maybe today you read a chapter you didn't read yesterday. Maybe you saved a little more than you spent yesterday. Maybe you offered kindness instead of irritation. Maybe you put in one more hour of focused work. These may seem small, but they add up. 1% better each day compounds into extraordinary results over time. What makes this principle so freeing is that it takes the pressure off comparison. You don't have to be better than the next person. You don't have to win every contest or outshine every peer. You only have to beat one person. The person you were yesterday. That's a competition you can always win because the control is in your hands. And here's the truth, even the great successes in history lived by this principle. They didn't start out towering giants. They began with small, daily commitments. They ask, what can I do today that moves me one step further? And as those days added up, so did their strength, their influence, and their legacy. This mindset also protects you from discouragement. When you measure success by being better today than yesterday, you can celebrate progress no matter how small. You don't get overwhelmed by how far you still have to go. Instead, you recognize how far you've already come. That perspective fuels persistence. It keeps you motivated because you see growth happening right before your eyes. The real joy of life is in that steady climb. It's in knowing you are not the same person you were last year, last month, or even yesterday. It's in waking up each day with a fresh chance to improve. That's something applause can't give you, money can't buy you, and recognition can't replace. That's the quiet victory of progress. So make the commitment. Don't let a day pass without improving something. Your discipline, your knowledge, your attitude, your health, your relationships. The changes don't have to be dramatic. They just have to be consistent. Each day, build a life that makes yesterday jealous of today. At the end of the journey, success will not be measured by how many people admired you or how loud the world cheered. It will be measured by whether you lived up to your potential. Step by step, day by day, becoming better, wiser, stronger, kinder, more disciplined. That is the real prize. Remember this, the goal is not to be the best in the world. The goal is to be the best version of yourself. Yesterday set the standard, today is your chance to raise it, and tomorrow will prove the reward. As long as you're better today than yesterday, you're winning the only race that truly matters. Approval fades quickly, but self-respect lasts. That's a truth too many people discover late in life. They spend years chasing the applause of others, only to find that the noise dies down, the crowd moves on, and the recognition doesn't fill the emptiness inside. Approval is a momentary thrill, but self-respect is a lifelong reward. If you have the first without the second, you will always feel hollow, but if you have the second, you won't need the first. The danger of living for approval is that it makes you dependent. It ties your sense of worth to the opinions of others. If they clap, you feel good. If they criticize, you feel crushed. Your entire mood rises and falls based on someone else's reaction. That's no way to live. Approval is fickle. One day they love you, The next day they forget you, and sometimes the same people who once praised you may turn against you. If your identity is built on their approval, you will live insecure and unstable. Self-respect, on the other hand, comes from a different place. It comes from keeping your word to yourself. It comes from doing the right thing when nobody is watching. It comes from discipline, consistency, and honesty. When you lay your head on the pillow at night, the question isn't, do they approve of me? It's, do I approve of me? If you can answer yes to that, you have something that no applause can replace. Approval is about performance. Self-respect is about character. Performance may earn you recognition, but character earns you peace. Performance may draw attention, but character builds foundation. People may cheer for what you do, but deep down, you know if you're living in line with who you really are. That inner alignment, that's what creates lasting self-respect. Consider this: applause is external, but self-respect is internal. You can't control whether people notice you, but you can control whether you live up to your own standards. You can't control whether people praise you, but you can control whether you kept your promises, followed through on your commitments, and gave your best effort. And that control gives you power. Because once you realize you don't need applause to validate you, you become free. The irony is that many people who chase approval never get enough of it. It's like drinking salt water. It doesn't quench your thirst. It only makes you crave more. The louder the applause, the more you want, and the more empty you feel when it's gone. But self-respect is satisfying. It doesn't leave you craving, it leaves you content. When you live with self-respect, you don't need the crowd to tell you who you are. You already know. Now, self-respect isn't free. It requires effort. It requires sacrifice. It requires that you do the hard things when no one is looking. It's built in the quiet decisions that nobody applauds, waking up early to keep your commitment, telling the truth when a lie would be easier, saying no when temptation calls. Each of those choices adds a brick to the foundation of self-respect, and over time that foundation becomes unshakable. On the other hand, approval doesn't require much at all. You can gain it quickly with charm, with performance, even with pretending. But it doesn't last because it isn't rooted in reality. Self-respect lasts because it's built on truth. You know when you've done your best. You know when you've lived up to your standards. And that inner knowledge can carry you through seasons when the crowd is silent, or worse, when the crowd is against you. Ask yourself this: 10 years from now, which will matter more? That people once clapped for you, or that you built a life you can be proud of? The answer is obvious. Applause fades, trends change, crowds move on. But your self-respect will still be with you when the noise is gone. So choose wisely. Don't trade your integrity for approval. Don't sell your peace for popularity. Don't confuse recognition with fulfillment. Seek respect within yourself, not just applause from others. If you live that way, the external approval may come or it may not. But either way, you'll be at peace. Because you'll know you lived in a way that earned your own respect. And in the end, that's the kind of approval that truly lasts. Living for others makes you a slave. Living for growth sets you free. It sounds harsh, but it's true. The moment your decisions are dictated by what others think of you, you stop being the master of your own life. You hand over the keys of your destiny and let someone else drive. And the sad part is, most people don't even realize they're doing it. They wake up, make choices, chase careers, buy things, even form relationships, all to satisfy someone else's expectations. That isn't living, that's bondage. When you live for others, your value rises and falls on their opinion. If they like you, you feel good. If they criticize you, you feel crushed. If they ignore you, you feel invisible. Imagine tying your happiness to something as fragile as someone's opinion, a thought that can change overnight. That's why living for others is slavery. It keeps you chained to approval, bound by comparison, and controlled by fear of rejection. But when you choose to live for growth, something incredible happens. You become free. Growth doesn't require anyone's permission. It doesn't ask for applause. It's between you and your effort, your choices, your discipline. When you focus on becoming better today than yesterday, you don't need the crowd to validate you. You carry your own measure of success inside. That's freedom. Think about it. If you live for others, you're always reacting. They clap. You smile. They frown. You doubt yourself. They gossip. You shrink. You are constantly adjusting yourself to fit their ever-changing opinions. But if you live for growth, you're proactive. You set your own course. You decide your own pace. And you measure yourself against your own progress. That makes you independent of the crowd. Living for growth means you do things not because they will make you look good, but because they will make you better. You read the book not to impress others, but to expand your mind. You save money not to show off, but to build security. You exercise not to earn compliments, but to strengthen your health. These choices may not bring immediate approval, but they bring lasting reward. One of the biggest traps in life is comparison. When you live for others, you're constantly looking sideways. You measure yourself against neighbors, friends, coworkers, strangers on the internet. You let their image of success define your own. But that's slavery too, because you'll never catch up. There will always be someone with more. Living for growth shifts the focus from sideways to forward. The question isn't, am I ahead of them? The question is, am I ahead of who I was? That's a race you can win every single day. The freedom of living for growth also shows up in how you handle failure. If you live for others, failure feels like humiliation. You fear their judgment, so you hide your mistakes. But if you live for growth, failure becomes information. You learn, you adjust, you get stronger. You're not trapped by shame because your goal isn't to look perfect. It's to become better. And that mindset sets you free to take risks, to try, to stretch yourself. There's another kind of slavery that comes from trying to please everyone. You can't do it. People will always want different things from you, and if you try to satisfy them all, you'll end up drained, confused, and unfulfilled. But when you live for growth, you simplify. You stop asking, what do they expect of me? And start asking, what is the best version of me requiring from me? That question clears away the noise and gives you clarity. Here's the truth, living for others may give you temporary acceptance, but living for growth gives you lasting respect, especially self-respect. And self-respect is the foundation of freedom. When you know you're growing, you don't need to beg for recognition. You don't need to bend under the weight of expectation. You stand tall because you know you're becoming more than you were. So break the chains of approval. Stop letting the opinions of others be the prison walls around your life. Choose growth instead. Choose discipline, learning, persistence, character. Those are things you can control, things that can't be taken from you, things that lead to freedom. At the end of your life, the crowd's approval won't matter. Their opinions will fade. But the freedom that comes from living for growth will remain. You'll know you lived authentically, that you honored your potential, that you grew into someone you can respect. And that more than applause or approval is what it truly means to be free. Applause cannot replace authenticity. It may feel good to have people cheer for you, to hear compliments, to watch others nod in approval. But applause is external. Authenticity is internal. One lasts for a moment, the other lasts for a lifetime. The danger comes when people start trading their authenticity just to hear the sound of applause. They adjust who they are, they hide what they believe, they put on a mask, all to keep the crowd happy. But no matter how loud the applause gets, it cannot fill the emptiness that comes from living a life that isn't truly yours. Applause is a reflection of perception, not necessarily of truth. People can cheer for something that isn't real. They can clap for an image, a performance, a version of you that's carefully staged. But if deep down you know it isn't who you are, then every cheer feels hollow. You can fool the crowd, but you cannot fool yourself. Authenticity is about living in alignment with who you really are, not who others want you to be. When you chase applause, you become dependent on the approval of others. When they notice you, you feel valuable. When they ignore you, you feel invisible. That's a dangerous way to live, because you're handing the steering wheel of your life to the opinions of others. But authenticity keeps you grounded. You know who you are, you know what you stand for, and you don't need applause to validate it. The problem with applause is that it fades quickly. Today they love you, tomorrow they forget you, and the next day they may criticize you. If you've built your identity on their cheers, you'll fall apart when the noise stops. But authenticity doesn't depend on outside noise. It's built on inner truth. It allows you to stand tall whether the crowd is clapping, silent, or even booing. Authenticity is powerful because it brings peace. You don't have to waste energy pretending. You don't have to constantly change masks depending on who you're around. You don't have to live in fear of being found out. Instead, you can walk in the confidence that comes from being real. And the funny thing is, people respect authenticity far more than performance. They may not always agree with you, but they'll trust you because they know you're genuine. Applause can be addictive. Once you taste it, you want more. You begin to make decisions not based on your values, but on what will get the loudest reaction. That's how authenticity gets lost. But the truth is, applause is never enough. No matter how much you get, it cannot replace the deep satisfaction of knowing you lived honestly, faithfully, and true to yourself. Think about the people you admire the most. Chances are, it's not just because they were popular or praised, but because they were real. They stood firm in who they were, even when it cost them applause. That's authenticity, and it lasts far longer than the temporary noise of approval. Now, authenticity isn't always glamorous. Sometimes it means standing alone. Sometimes it means being misunderstood. Sometimes it means disappointing people who wanted you to play a role. But in the long run, it's worth it, because authenticity builds character, and character outlives applause. At the end of the day, the applause of others will not give you peace at night, but authenticity will. When you can look in the mirror and know that you lived with integrity, that you spoke the truth, that you honored your values, that's a reward applause can never match. So don't sell yourself for claps and cheers. Don't let the noise of approval drown out the voice of your conscience. Live real, live true, live authentic. If the crowd applauds, fine. If they don't, fine. Because the greatest sound isn't the applause of others. It's the quiet confidence of knowing you lived your life as the person you were created to be. And that, above all else, is worth more than 1,000 standing ovations.